So after I recorded part one, I thought I had something pretty good, but then I went to go pick up my kid, and I was like, I should have brought my phone. I could be talking to ChatGPT about this more. Well, maybe I'll just have a moment and think. So I was thinking, my wife goes to get my kid out of the daycare, and I'm like, wait a minute, what happens if you have like this cascade of failures? Like, what's the worst failure mode in this sort of optimistic roll-up model for DLCs, repoing a tokenized Bitcoin for the real Bitcoin so that you can, use Bitcoin and trade there, right? And I thought, well, you need um, you need an arbitrator who's at a higher level. And so, okay, I go back. I spent a couple more hours working on this and hashing it out, so to speak, with GPT. And it's like, okay, you can have like different time locks, so you can have a window where the arbitrator can like rip a CDT path that rolls the DLC into a new DLC or refunds it. Um, and so if you have already slashed with this fractional staking a um, a pool with a fraud proof that has done the wrong resolution, then the arbitrator is also staked, and their job is to go through and start ripping out all of the immature transactions in these DLCs that haven't novated yet, that haven't matured, um, for that particular pool in order to denude them, to punish them, to sort of render bankruptcy. So I considered, okay, you could refund everybody and burn the tokens, but now you've like destroyed fungibility. And also, what if you've lost the tokens? You have to settle it to the people who won those tokens, right? So it's not good. It's not great to do that. And I thought, okay, well, what if you like preload an identical DLC with a different Oracle relayer pool governing it? And then, yeah, that's a little bit better. And then you go to, what if you have a cascade of failures? So you go down the list, and then eventually you do just like default everything. You just and you go, well, guys, if you won any tokens in the last week, it's over. Like we just fiat accompli. Sorry, this experiment failed, but at least people got like most of their money back, unless it happened to be like a big volatility week, which would probably correlate to those kind of moves. So I was like, it's okay. It's okay. And then what about a collusion between the arbitrator Oracle pool that governs the other Oracle pools and a particular Oracle pool? And then by having it open, people can just come in and send in AI agents, and this is only going to make cybersecurity more challenging in the future for crypto and TradFi and everything, right? Um, and then I kind of thought, well, everything is a multi-sig, but like by golly, there's got to be a way to do it better, right? Um, and then it's just kind of like if I had like a centralized exchange, like I could have started a centralized exchange in 2014, and not have much volume. But maybe by like 2016, it would have got, would have like added perps after BitMax. Like, oh yeah, that's a good idea, right? And or even in 2019 when Bybit started, right? And Bybit's now a huge business, and they had something go wrong, and they just make a lot of money on kind of high fees, and they covered it, and they've earned it out. Actually, they do amazing revenue. I think that's going to be disrupted soon by all these lower fee exchanges. But is this, and then well, you got an attorney, and then this guy has like a reputation, and you might go to jail, and blah, 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 right? And it's just like, yeah, okay, but like, that's just like the same way that money's always worked. And this isn't really anything interesting or innovative. And furthermore, AI changes that because AI hackers don't care about going to jail, right? They don't care about their reputation. They care about potentially bootstrapping a bunch of crypto that they can wash and bribe people with in order to accumulate more computing resources to begin bootstrapping their hive mind towards whatever, taking over the world, or building Dyson spheres, or whatever it is, right? Transcending the universe, something like this, right? So you need like more mechanics, right? Um, and then I considered the graph theory algo that we developed in 2018 and 19 in collaboration with Dr. Leaky Rubio. And I thought it would be cool to hire a math PhD, and then it was like, wait, I'm just doing like multilateral clearing. So is this even like, was this just kind of like an exercise, and like I wanted to hire a PhD and like make a patentable kind of algorithm, and like I thought graph theory was cool. But no, like this actually is quite germane when we're talking about netting counterparties and rolling DLCs, because what it allows you to do is collapse the attack surface for corruption, and end up basically spinning people into bilateral DLCs. And then those bilateral DLCs can be settled by an oracle that is just publishing a price rather than a percentage of repayment enum that gives you a spectrum of how much you spit out back to the guy, or roll into like another DLC, so you keep the token alive, versus spit into like a relay pool and have to relay. Um, and then it gets a little complex, but I thought that was interesting. So that was a little breakthrough. And then towards the end of the day, I realized I went back in time mentally to 1 year ago when I was considering the same problem, getting ready to launch just to do spot. And what I had in mind at the time were Merkleized proofs that you could fit into a light client to back a bridge. And then you have the problem with like trying to adapt trade layer as an account-based token protocol into this hybrid colored coin system, which is doable, but it's easier to do for spots and sends, for spot trades and sends, because those have discrete outputs that can have rules that you can say this is the output, and then you trace the RGB sort of body of that spiritual account money through a Merkle branch and then for derivatives you could add rules to use that graph algo and kind of stitch it together. So this is a fair amount of work, but this is what I was imagining as the roadmap to integrate trade layer into UTXO more fully at that time, as well as off-chain bridging, bridging in liquidity LUSD or ETH and near perhaps, and so on, right? Um, but okay, I think the bridging is still interesting. But then I came back to, oh, I can make a near contract to run the oracle. So then I don't have to worry about, now, of course, at the margins, you do have to worry. But the staking an asset. Yes, Near's price has been, thoroughly beaten up. Let me take a look at those real quick. Obviously, the sentiment, even though Bitcoin's still over 100K, sentiment is not great right now. But such is life in the big city of the crypto biz. But yeah, this is an asset with a market cap. That's still like $1.8 billion, I think. It's about $1 billion. Oh, okay. There you go. Fully diluted, it's actually over $1 billion. 2.4 billion. So obviously that's more than what Trade Layer is worth at this time. God willing, it will reach near parity in about a year or two. We'll see. Not a prediction. Um, not a solicitation. So not even a forward-looking statement, just to be technical. Um, but yeah, look, $2 billion asset. It's staked. There's a deterministic VM. It's much more technically sophisticated than an EVM model. And furthermore, if I am really filling up blocks, let's say on Litecoin, and I'm going to optimize with MongoDB, I can probably get the latency on DB lookups way lower. I'm going to optimize with persistence checkpoints. Um, but looping through mainnet blocks can take a little while per 10,000 blocks versus testnet. And having just paired off some of the lookups in the main loop, it has improved dramatically. So actually haven't checked. I'm going to benchmark that pretty soon. I got to finish off with this plan and then tidy up my actual trading so I can start with just TL, BTC, and some small amount of TVL, 10, not 50, 100K. Just get things moving and like show the world that I have a product that works and is fast and is a bit sexy. It's a pretty good dex, man. And then I think I'll sell some tokens and pad my runway a little bit and then get to this. But this is a draft. So what this bad boy is going to do is we're going to have possibly an open-ended confederation of Oracle announcements. So this is basically an investment of mining fee to publish deltas, and you would include your address. You'd say, "Hey, I want to get in on this," and you would get into a round robin, and then you would have uptime and probably like some downtime slashing, um, as one does in staking. And I'm going to implement the staking fraud proof thing a little bit later. And initially, I'm going to not do it open, just run my own Oracle for the V1 and rebroadcast trade layer state. And I'm going to do it honestly. But if I wasn't doing it honestly, or if a bunch of random people were doing it, anybody would be able to say, hey, here's the last activation block, here's the hash of all the code, here is the consensus hash that is for this block's state, having run this code on all the opportunity data with the TL marker in it. Um, and therefore the balances are such and such, and it's different from what you published. And here's the fraud proof challenge, and the protocol can evaluate that deterministically because the protocol is deterministic. Pretty cool. And then there would be basically, I think doing the deltas as I went over in yesterday's video is smarter because they're cheaper transactions, there's less data. You can even fit like one delta into an 80 byte op return. So we're not getting controversial with the size of these. And so you have this challenge window for anybody to call BS on a particular contributor in this round robin. And and then once that has settled, and having like 7 blocks window for that, like an hour and some change on Bitcoin, possibly longer. Sometimes you have longer blocks. Would not be a big deal because the conveyor belt horizon for these DLCs is going to be. I was talking about a week yesterday, like 1,000 blocks, and then you keep slotting things in so that they all kind of have like 1,000-ish blocks. Sometimes more, sometimes less, so that you're filling in this conveyor so that approximately every block you have a roll. And so having a lead time on that is okay. Then you would have a federation rather than a confederation of like a high threshold, like 80% of M multi-sig. So this is where you would actually want to use BLS or Schnorr to make that more byte efficient, to cram all those SIGs in. And what that does is it has a privileged position in this smart contract, and it submits deltas, submits the new. Well, actually, maybe the delta, since that's computable as a fraud proof against what that titrator is doing. Probably, and this is all off chain, right? Like a DLC reveal is actually off chain. It's the CET that you subsequently unwrap by transmogrifying that reveal into a decryptor for a particular adapter sig, and then it gets published and Bitcoin moves. That is on chain, which then a fraud proof can account for. Um, so maybe it would just say, okay, this particular address has this balance, and then based on that the contract would use the chain abstraction library in combination with the Aurora like client to verify that this is a valid piece of data. So that way it can have a fail mode that is preventative and you don't have to like go back and wrap people's knuckles with flashing on trade layer. And then produce the signature on the Oracle reveal of that value, which then goes into deterministically, like in DLCs, like for instance, you can have an Oracle publish the Bitcoin price, and you can have a whole bunch of CETs, contract execution transactions, that will unwrap deterministically if that number is between like 100,000 and 101,000, 101,000 point one penny and 102,000 and so on. So this is how you get these very chunky like bilateral native DLCs, and maybe you make a bunch of those increments and you put it in a tap leaf so it's more data condensed, right? Like that's like your standard DLC. Um, So what trade layer gives you, or what an L2 in general would give you, and this is a little bit more native. This is more like an L. This is really an L 1.5 and not an L2. L2 would be when you're caching things in channels and you haven't published them yet. So that's something trade layer also supports. A year ago, I made a video about the plan for scaling that, and it's pretty cool, and it allows you to get like crazy TPS just based on like the micro latency of co-signing transactions, and have basically unlimited transactions, and you only pay the fee on like one settlement, so your effective fee becomes practically zero. And this would be the equivalent of like retail mode in lighter, um, where these venues that have a centralized smart contract and a centralized sequencer are monetizing by basically selling people latency. So if you want to execute in under, um, I think it's 150 milliseconds, it might be 300 milliseconds on lighter, then you pay 2 basis points as a taker. You pay zero point 0.2 basis points as a maker, and you pay zero as somebody who is comfortable essentially getting front run by those guys. Um, and that's cool. And when you're in a last look quote situation with a market maker who is getting a maker rebate and you're paying them half a basis point, um, and potentially you're signing a lot of transactions, you're only paying half a basis point on the notional ones, and you do like 200 trades. Now you're effectively that zero point 0.5 becomes 0.00 uh 25. I mean it's like tiny, right? So instead of paying $50 on $1 million notional as you would if you just published immediately and paid that fee on trade layer, um you are getting $2, like 25 cents or whatever it is. This a very small amount of fee for $1 million of notional that you've traded multiple times and you ended up netting some P&L from that. So like when people trade on like Bybit and they're paying like 6 basis points, it's crazy. It's a really high fee. But it's thick, right? So you can take 1 million off the top of the book because that top bid ask spread is 1 million thick oftentimes, and people get addicted to that. And it's like, yeah, you just paid $600 in fee, but maybe the price is gonna move in a minute, and I'm gonna make $1,000, blah blah blah, right? So people love the rush. Um, so anyway, how does Bitcoin work in this DeFi system? You put it in a DLC. The DLC is governed by this near contract. Uh, Instead of fully implementing trade layer on near, which is going to have a decent amount of DA rental near that I have to accumulate. Now I could raise money and I could buy near at these prices, and it might only be like 10 or 20 grand worth of near that I gotta slot up to reserve the DA space to basically store the indexes of trade layer and trade layer state. And then that near contract of like the trade layer port on near would be the authoritative oracle instead of these Bitcoin addresses that are both first publishing data and then titrating that as the authoritative feeder of that data to this contract, and then this contract settles the DLCs. Um, and then furthermore, it would route so that I don't have that logic in this draft, but it would route the money that somebody has won to them, um, which is pretty cool. It really simplifies the number of things that you gotta kind of game theory govern. It makes it deterministic, and it means that somebody would have to accumulate maybe $1 billion worth of near, and then there may be other mechanisms of delegating proof of stake to try and like reorg near basically. Um, and the signing federation that the Near Foundation provides, which is what I'll use to start. Later on, you can do custom ones as we get into that. Um, so I'm not going to say that this is like radically better than Arch or Arcade or Bob. Bob's got ZK, right? But they're not rooted on chain. So I like VTXO and Arch because they are more rooted on chain. This is more like trade layer. I guess Tap is kind of like in that ballpark as well with like Taproot assets. Um, and they tend to all have this kind of like elaborate multi-sig with a governance layer involved in signing off on state transitions. And then maybe those state transitions are embedded in Tapleaf scripts. And because we haven't activated any other opcodes in 4 years, it's been over 4 years since Taproot was activated. We can't really do all that much with those tap leaves, but we can surely make, some pretty fearsome DLCs. And like VTXOs are kind of like more efficiently packed DLCs. Maybe Alex would want to debate, the nitpick of that. And I'd love to have that discussion. Honestly, that would be really cool. Um, yeah. So this is the roadmap that I am probably going to pursue after I finish off this launch with the just synthetic, like backed by the casino um, collateral in a small quantity. And hey, maybe we can get to 10 million daily volume or five at least off of like 100 or 200K TVL and keep it kind of chill. Um, just kind of raise a little bit of money. Maybe the price does some does the jig. Um, and I think that's manageable. I think that's sane. I don't want to like go into the multi-millions with that. I think it's too much moral hazard. I value my reputation and I value my soul, and to not consume people's wealth with shenanigans. Um, yeah, so I am actually technical and a researcher, and a free thinker who is open to finding tools where they are to be found. So to actually implement this, I just basically need to make one, the loan DLC. So I've got like a pretty good groundwork for that from working on that in June. Um, Two, integrate that into the wallet. So that might be there are libraries for that, and that might be a few days. Three, develop the transaction type for what is a canonical DLC, and I'm going to make that like generic, and it's probably going to require either over 80 byte op return because it's a fair amount of like I actually want to put at least what is the canonical um format on chain so that the protocol can then reference that, look at addresses involved to fill it in, and then checks on that hash on the I'm pegging in Bitcoin transactions, which would include the hash of their DLC. And it's valid if it meets that particular template um, for its particular parameters. Then the Oracle on-chain start. I'm gonna like skip the fraud proofs for now. I'm gonna keep it simple. And then this near contract. Um, Not literally this draft. I need to add the plumbing and cross contract gets a little needy for gas. And then there would be a fee involved for um like two transactions to settle and route the DLC. Um and then a relevant Oracle and then the gas. And I think that might be between Bitcoin and near approximately $1 in Bitcoin fees, give or take. Obviously, the rate fluctuates, but at current BByte fee rates. And then perhaps quite a lot less than $1 in near gas, maybe like 20 cents. So not bad. And then the peg out would be some money, except for like you've gotten P and L out of using trade layer, hopefully, right? And you just end up having this Bitcoin land on your address, which burns the token. And then if you want to like recommit that and recycle your collateral, you can do it. But you have to pay for that, right? But I think that's pretty cool, actually. I like that UX of like you end up just having Bitcoin profits. Um, so that is the plan for Trade Layer. And I'm very open to things being modular and for people to be able to structure, possibly me, obviously, as the founder, I'm like a likely contributor here, to do other Bitcoin type tokens with other canonical DLCs, um, and possibly other architectures in a future activation. I do have a no, not this one. Where's the, let's see. I do have a transaction type reserved for putting in to the protocol. Here is the hash of a WASM, and then possibly just the raw code, even, or possibly the minified bytecode. I'm not 100% sure about that. And then the protocol would have this registry of such and such address is associated and controlled by a chain abstraction smart contract. Um, so like I'm doing base 36 in the protocol, so it's only 1 byte. So it's 36 transactions. Um, and this would be it. So it's actually sort of simple on the face of it. Um, but what that means is that the protocol can recognize that, and then for one of these other transactions, I'm retiring this one, and I'm doing would be a variation on the managed smart property. So I got to conserve with polymorphism. Um, so you would create the oracle. I'm going to add a param here, um, such as and enum, and keep that as an integer. Um, so if it's null, it defaults to just a price oracle, and then there'd be like, here's a state oracle, here's a DLC oracle, and then managed. Is that already a polymorphism? Yes, yes it is. Um, okay. So right now this is a flag. I'm gonna make this an enum, and if it's zero, it's fixed. So if someone wants to like do an ICO on trade later, this is a very legacy concept from like 2014, right? Like made safe, um, AMP, not the AMP that is existed in the 2020s. It's kind of gone defunct. Um, yeah, so I'll make this an enum, and then at one it would be like a tether style thing, and then two it would be this kind of Bitcoin repository transaction. And then the grant would, right, make that. Um, yeah, okay, so here's this bad boy. I'm gonna work on that later after I get Bitcoin into the protocol, and there's enough volume that it's interesting to go into hyper mode. So I hope this is relatively clear that there is a path to a very viable contender of using Bitcoin, and everybody in this business is basically constrained by the same lack of novel opcodes, and we have to make do with a combination of things. And also, I would encourage, like Alex, for example, to consider using a near chain abstraction contract to manage their ASP pools and automate their thing. I think Arch has some kind of staking to govern their validator set. I don't know if they have a token per se, if that's like haram for them in their ideology, but maybe they do a circular thing with Bitcoin. That's how Botanics does things. Stacks ultimately does this with their SBTC using STX staking. Um, and honestly, it's better than putting things in a trust and having a wrapped Bitcoin or Litecoin or what have you on Ethereum, right? It's better to try and like, of course, the reality is that Ethereum has so much stablecoin float that you deploy a perp dex there and people can just tag into it and start farming the points, hopefully to pump and dump the airdrop before the next venue comes along and cuts the fee rate. And they're all like centralized admin and centralized sequencer. So, I mean, one thing I'll say about Bitcoin DeFi, like, yeah, it hasn't really gotten traction this cycle, but everybody is forced to innovate in architecture. Whereas all of these Solana, maybe the Solana one's a little bit, 'cause Solana has some weird architectural quirks to it. But all of these like EVM contracts, they're only really competing on price and marketing. And Yeah, like nobody's done a decentralized sequencer proposal on any of these products, including Hyperliquid, on any of these things. So I hope that Bitcoin DeFi is rewarded. Hopefully, I'm among the rewardees, and I hope that you will join me as we launch TradeLayer in the early VIP section. Cheers.